Let's get right into it. Number 10. Right now, your eyes are lying to you about a hole in your vision. Not a metaphor, an actual gap. Each eye has a small patch on the retina with no light-sensing cells at all, the spot where the optic nerve exits toward the brain. That blind spot sits roughly 15 degrees off-center in each eye, and it's big enough to swallow a chunk of whatever you're looking at. You don't notice because your brain quietly fills in the missing patch using the pattern around it, guessing what should be there and rendering it as if it were real. It's the same trick as a phone app smoothing out a blurry photo, except your brain never tells you it did the smoothing. Scientists have mapped this since the 1600s, when French physicist Edmond Marriott first demonstrated it to the court of Louis XIV using nothing but 2 dots on paper. Somewhere in your field of vision, right now, there's a patch of nothing that your brain has confidently painted over with a guess. You've been trusting that guess your entire life without a single complaint. Number 9. A rat in a 1950s lab pressed a lever until it collapsed from exhaustion, and it did it entirely by choice. Researchers had wired electrodes into a region of the rat's brain tied to reward, letting the animal trigger a jolt of stimulation each time it pressed a lever. Some rats pressed the lever over 7,000 times in a single hour, ignoring food, water, and sleep to keep pressing. This wasn't about pleasure exactly. Later analysis suggested the circuit controlled wanting more than liking, a craving loop rather than a satisfaction loop. That distinction matters, because it's the same circuit modern apps are built to hijack, the one that keeps a thumb scrolling long after the content stopped being interesting 10 minutes ago. Compare it to a slot machine that never quite pays out but always feels one pull away from paying out. The rat wasn't chasing joy. It was chasing the promise of joy, which turned out to be a far stronger leash. Your phone doesn't need to make you happy to keep you holding it. It just needs to make you think happy is one more tap away. Number 8. If you were shown a photo of your own face slightly slowed down and asked to identify it, there's a real chance you'd pick a different photo instead. Not because your memory is bad, because your brain doesn't store your face the way a camera does. Research on the effacement and mirror recognition effect has found people often recognize a digitally beautified version of their own face faster than the unaltered original, since the brain leans on an idealized mental average rather than a precise snapshot. Psychologists have run versions of this test with morphing software, blending a person's real face with an attractive stranger's face in small increments, and many participants pick a blend, not the true photo, as most self-representative. It's the same reasoning your brain uses to smooth over a shaky memory of a birthday party, filling gaps with what feels right instead of what happened. Think of a photocopy of a photocopy, each version drifting slightly from the original without anyone noticing the drift. The face staring back at you in the mirror this morning was never the real one your brain was comparing it to. Your own reflection has been quietly photoshopped by your own head the whole time. Number 7. Somewhere between hearing bad news and reacting to it, your brain runs a delay you never feel. Not a long one. About 80 milliseconds, roughly the time it takes a hummingbird to flap its wings twice. That gap exists because raw sensory information has to travel to the brain, get processed, and get bundled into a coherent now before you're consciously aware of it. Neuroscientist Benjamin Libet's experiments in the 1980s pushed this further, finding that brain activity linked to a decision showed up before subjects reported consciously deciding to act, by a few hundred milliseconds. That timing gap has fueled decades of debate over how much of choice happens before you're even aware you're choosing. Compare it to watching a fireworks show from far away, where the boom always lags behind the flash, except here the lag is inside your own skull, and you can't hear it happening. It's unsettling in a quiet way, the idea that the version of now you're living in is really a slightly stale rerun. You're not living in the present. You're living in a well-produced highlight reel of about 1/10 of a second ago. Number 6. A single word whispered in the right order can make you remember something that never happened. Psychologist Elizabeth Loftus proved this repeatedly with an experiment nicknamed Lost in the Mall, where researchers described 4 childhood memories to participants, 3 real and 1 entirely fabricated, involving getting lost in a shopping mall as a kid. About 25% of participants not only accepted the fake memory as real, some added extra invented details on their own, describing the color of the stranger's jacket who supposedly helped them. Their brains hadn't just accepted a lie, they had decorated it. This matters far beyond a lab, since eyewitness testimony has historically leaned on the assumption that vivid memory equals accurate memory, and those aren't the same thing at all. Compare it to a rumor spreading through a group chat, gaining new details each time it gets retold, until nobody remembers the original version anymore. Your memory isn't a filing cabinet. It's more like a document with edit access left open to anyone, including yourself. Somewhere in your own childhood, there's probably a memory sitting there that never actually happened, and it feels just as real as the ones that did. Number 5. People who have never left their hometown will confidently defend opinions on foreign policy, wine, and jazz theory with the same certainty as actual experts. Not out of arrogance exactly, out of a wiring flaw. This is the Dunning-Kruger Effect, named after psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger, who found in 1999 that people with the least skill in a subject tend to rate their own competence the highest, since the same lack of knowledge that makes them bad at something also makes them unable to spot how bad they are. In their original study, participants who scored in the bottom 25th percentile on grammar and logic tests estimated their own performance as above average, sometimes by more than 30 percentile points. It's the reasoning equivalent of not knowing you're lost because you never learned to read a map in the first place. Genuine experts, meanwhile, often underestimate themselves, assuming a task that feels easy to them must be easy for everyone. So confidence and competence run on almost separate tracks, occasionally crossing but never guaranteed to. The most dangerous person in a room is rarely the expert quietly doubting themselves. It's the amateur one wrong answer away from writing a book about it. Number 4. Your brain has a built-in habit of grading the last few minutes of any experience far more than the whole thing put together. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman demonstrated this with a colonoscopy study in the 1990s, where patients rated their overall discomfort not by total pain endured, but almost entirely by how the procedure felt in its final moments. In one trial, patients who had an extra few minutes of mild, tapering discomfort added onto the end of an already painful procedure rated the whole experience as less unpleasant than patients whose procedure simply stopped at the worst point. More total pain rated as a better experience, purely because of how it ended. This is called the peak end rule, and it quietly runs your judgment of vacations, relationships, and movies without asking permission. Compare it to a 10-course meal where 9 dishes were incredible, and the last one was mediocre, and somehow that's the dish you keep bringing up. Marketers have known this for decades, which is why free samples and thank you notes tend to show up at the exit, not the entrance. Your brain isn't grading the story of your life on average, it's grading it on the last sentence. Number 3. A crowd of people watching someone collapse on a sidewalk is statistically less likely to help than a single bystander would be. Not because people in groups are colder, because responsibility gets quietly divided up and diluted until nobody feels personally on the hook. This is the bystander effect, first documented rigorously after the 1964 murder of Kitty Genovese in New York, a case that later reporting complicated, but that still launched decades of research into the phenomenon. Psychologists Bibb Latané and John Darley ran follow-up experiments showing that participants were significantly slower to report an apparent emergency when they believed other people could also hear it happening, sometimes taking several minutes longer than participants who believed they were the only witness. Each person in the group assumes someone else has already acted, or is better positioned to act, and that assumption spreads through the crowd like a current with nowhere to land. Compare it to a group project where everyone assumes someone else is handling the slide deck, until the deadline arrives and it turns out nobody was. It's a strange kind of math, where more witnesses should mean more safety, but instead adds up to less. Somewhere right now, that same math is quietly working against a person sitting alone in a crowded room. Number 2. If you're shown a fake photo of yourself at a childhood event that never occurred, there's a real chance you'll start narrating memories from it within minutes. Psychologists at the University of California ran exactly this test, doctoring childhood photos to place adult participants inside events like hot air balloon rides that had never happened. After a short interview process, roughly half of participants developed detailed false memories of the fabricated event, some describing the temperature of the air or the fear they felt during liftoff. Their brains hadn't just accepted the photo as evidence. They had gone ahead and generated sensory details to match it, unprompted. This matters because photos are treated culturally as proof, the closest thing to hard evidence a memory can have, and yet here the photo was the lie the memory built itself around. Compare it to a courtroom accepting a forged signature simply because it looked official enough. Your brain isn't checking photos against memory. It's often doing the reverse, quietly editing memory to match whatever photo it's just been handed. Somewhere in a family photo album, a fabricated memory might already be sitting quietly, waiting for someone to ask about it at Thanksgiving. Number 1. Right now, your brain is running an entire simulation of the world that is several hundred milliseconds behind reality, and it's doing this specifically so you don't notice the delay. This isn't the same as the earlier processing lag. This is bigger. Neuroscientists studying predictive processing argue the brain doesn't passively receive the world through your senses at all. It constantly predicts what's about to happen next, then only bothers alerting you when reality breaks the prediction. That's why a familiar hallway feels instantly recognizable, while an unexpected object in that same hallway seems to jump out at you, because your brain wasn't really looking, it was checking a forecast against what showed up. Some researchers estimate the majority of what you perceive as seeing is actually your brain's best guess, lightly corrected by incoming sensory data rather than built from it directly. Compare it to a weather forecaster who mostly just repeats yesterday's forecast unless something dramatic changes. You don't experience the world as it is. You experience your brain's rough draft of the world, quietly revised only when the draft turns out to be wrong. The real world is out there somewhere, and what you're living in is your brain's best guess about it, running one draft behind reality forever. That's all 10. If your brain enjoyed getting exposed like that, subscribe for more.